Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed calls on Russia and African countries to uplift their collaboration to a new height. Hello and welcome to this news hour with the news. I'm Shifar Alakom. The first Ethiopian Transport Investment Summit opened in Addis Ababa yesterday. Senior government officials, including President Sahle-Work Zewde, attended the opening of the two-day event. In her opening remarks, the president said that the transport and logistics sectors would play a remarkable role to bring about development in Ethiopia. Both sectors require the involvement of not only the government but also the private sector, she said, adding that the 10-year development plan of the Ministry of Transport will have a key role to modernize the transport industry. In her concluding remarks, the president called upon all stakeholders to do their part for the success of the development plan. Minister of Transport Dagmawit Moges, for her part, said the government has been undertaking broad activities to expand road infrastructure and modernize the logistics sector. African leaders must prepare themselves to properly handle the stark truth that unless the continent appropriately copes with its internal needs, it is highly likely to end up prey to external meddling. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made the remark while addressing the Russia-Africa International InterParty Conference. Appreciating Russia's partnership in Africa's independence movement and fight against counterproductive interference, the chair of the Prosperity Party, Abiy Ahmed, has expressed his confidence that Russia and Africa will uplift their collaboration to a new height. The story is presented as follows. In accordance with the agreements reached at the Russia-Africa Summit, and in order to prepare for the next Russia-Africa Summit, at the initiative of the United Russia Party, an international inter-party conference was held dubbed Russia-Africa Reviving Traditions. The meeting has featured the participation of over 20 parliamentary majority parties from African countries. In his address to the conference, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Russia has been Africa's key ally in its struggle against oppression, foreign intrusion and colonial slavery.
I want to quote an African proverb. Open quote, when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. End of quote. I regret to acknowledge that we have not yet won the battle against enemies within. Chronic poverty, inequality, unemployment, identity-based politics, and violence. It is because of such enemies within that we stand vulnerable to external interference. In order to respond to the basic demands of our people, to defeat the enemies within and stand strong against interference, we must revisit our traditions and solidify our friendship and renew our time-tested solidarity.
Prime Minister Abiy has also elaborated on Ethiopia's indigenous philosophy of Madamar, or synergy, to the participants of the Inter-Party Conference.
Madamar exemplifies coming together, working in sync, with purpose and vision for a common destiny, as our guiding light in everything we do. At a fundamental level, Madamar is a call to our nation, Africa, and its people to stay away from the dangerous cycle of always throwing away the past and starting with a clean slate to build on the accumulated wisdom of our forefathers, to take the best from our past, to invest in an understanding of our concrete problems and adapt our solutions as we go, and in the process, leave a legacy of hope to our children.
Explaining about his party, Premier Abiy says the Prosperity Party believes in economic growth, meeting the wholesome needs of humanity.
The material, the emotional, and the intellectual. Growth must be situated in a political space where one engages with the big questions of society, where one's body is nurtured and one's safety is not in question. Growth must create opportunities for individuals to express their talents and translate it to personal wins and collective improvements.
The Ethiopian Prime Minister has finally advised African leaders to open their eyes to the stark truth that unless the continent properly copes with its internal needs, it will open door to external meddling.
I wish to remind you of the uncomfortable truth that unless we respond to the internal needs of our communities, our countries, and our dear continent, we will fall prey to interference by others near and far. Africa and the Russia Federation have a tradition of questioning, challenging the status quo, and imagining new possibilities. We have a tradition of setting philosophical precedents that have helped humanity pause and wonder. Let us indeed revive those traditions.
The Premier has also expressed his confidence that the 2022 Russia-Africa Summit will provide historic platforms for lasting partnership between Africa and Russia. In another development, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has furiously lashed out at some governments and so-called superpowers for their attempt to make his government a lackey. The Prime Minister, in his unequivocal address to the Parliament, said he will choose death over his country's sovereignty. The Premier has, however, commended governments who showed solidarity to the Ethiopian people and government at this trying time. Adula Teklemariam presents the story as follows.
Members of the parliament raised questions as to how the current status of Ethiopia's diplomatic relation is going on. Responding to their queries, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed furiously bashed those external powers who he said were trying to twist hands. Their desire to make the government a lackey emanates from their feeble understanding that Ethiopia is in a precarious situation, the Premier said. He, however, commended those who showed solidarity at this trying time.
I came across three kinds of foreign groups in our current diplomacy, of whom some of them appear to be our strong partners, which is beyond our imagination. These countries are really aware of Ethiopia's dignity, history, and its bright future. They also want to cooperate with us in our development endeavors. Ethiopia will also be by their side in case of any circumstance they may face. This darkness helped us spot out our partners. On the other hand, we witnessed countries intending to twist our hands for their political agenda. But the third force considers that it is time to destroy and divide Ethiopia. They allocate budget and seriously work on it. Finally, I wanted to notify that Ethiopia is a country that defeated a well-organized army in the region. No country can do this.
The Premier further outlined that Ethiopia will never bend the knee for any external foes planning to coil hands.
I do not want any conflict with any country. My intention is not to mess with external forces. What I need is maintaining Ethiopia's prosperity in a peaceful manner. But what I want you to know is, I would rather die than allowing an external power violate Ethiopia's sovereignty. It is impossible to make things happen that way. However, we will work for mutual benefit only.
Prime Minister Abiy further said Ethiopia is always committed to collaboratively work with all countries as to the global diplomacy requires.
East African Affairs political analyst says the situation in the state of Tigray is purely an internal matter which ought to be solved by the Ethiopian government itself. The analyst Omar Radi cautions that uninvited foreign meddling in the internal affairs of Ethiopia will only lead to chaos. Kasaun Chane reports.
With the significant improvement in the security situation in the region, the government has now allowed unfettered access to humanitarian actors. It has also put in place an expedited clearance system to remove the bureaucratic hurdles in securing the necessary permits to operate in the Tigray region. Given this, a political commentator on East African affairs, Umar Radi, says that the situation in northern Ethiopia in Tigray state is a purely internal matter. According to him, the interference of third parties is unacceptable, whatever pretexts they may use. Umar highlighted that following the United Nations Charter, the countries of the world rather should advocate the territorial integrity of states and respect one's own country's national sovereignty.
The UN Security Council's attempt to hold a discussion and then followed by a resolution, to issue a resolution on Ethiopia has failed. Not only on the United States, on the UN Security Council's highest level, but on technical committee level as well. In the details of that process, we have learned that China, Russia, and India asked for rewording of the statement regarding what's going on in northern Ethiopia, where the Western powers disagreed on a statement, on a wordings, which indicates that each actor involved in the conflict should be held accountable and responsible. They refused to include such a statement. This indicates they are biased from the beginning. Now, is it new for the Western powers, such as the United States and European powers led by France, UK, and in this particular case, Norway? If I got that correct, I think it's Norway spearheading the UN push. Is it new that they have tried to intervene on Ethiopian internal affairs and to twist Ethiopia's arms to make it succumb to their interests? It is not new. It has happened before, so we shouldn't be surprised.
He accentuated that illegal foreign interference in Ethiopia's internal affairs will lead only to chaos, falling living standards of people, and disregard for universally recognized human rights.
What we see from the European Union mainly is inconsistency when it comes to what is happening in northern Ethiopia and overall in Ethiopia. It is inconsistent because they have not said anything over the past 27 plus years where human rights violations, gross human rights violations have been happening almost on a daily basis. Almost on a daily basis in Ethiopia. This is not limited to Ethiopia. The previous regime had an extended arm that turned Somalia, South Sudan, into a chaotic war scene. They were instrumental, the previous regime and the entire government structure, particularly its security apparatus, were instrumental in creating havoc in neighboring countries. Eritrea, South Sudan, Sudan to a certain extent, and Somalia included. So they were weapons for the Western powers. So they didn't say anything. Had they been concerned for human rights violations, they could have spoken about human rights issues elsewhere in Ethiopia. What they are trying to do in northern Ethiopia is they are trying to save their partners in crime, in regional crimes. So it is a double standard. It's not about human rights. It's not about access to relief. It's not about that. It's about just forcing the Ethiopian government to accepting their terms, and at the same time trying to save this criminal clique that has been helping them do their dirty job across the region.
He also further noted that some countries of the world consistently repelled unlawful attempts to interfere from abroad in Ethiopia's internal affairs strictly.
applies to the Economic Commission of Africa to curtail the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. The donation included masks, gloves, sanitizers, and other materials. The donation is said pivotal in supporting African countries, including Ethiopia, to enhance the health sector and pledged similar donations in the future. During the occasion, it was also said that strong collaboration to effectively mitigate the spread of the coronavirus has a paramount importance to help Africa fight COVID-19. Now, economists recommend the establishment and expansion of cooperative agencies to curb the soaring inflation. They've also stated that the 20.6 inflation in February alone is a bad signal for a growing country like Ethiopia. Kushumalisa reports.
Inflation can be also seasonal. The seasonality is a theoretical framing, and mostly in a true market economy, it does also reflect that seasonality, because some commodities, like if you take and catch commodities, immediately after harvest time, we expect the price to go down, while during the growing season, we may expect the price to hike up.
The market at this moment is not very stable, that prices keep on increasing. And so he or she has a tendency to also follow that trend. So it is like a chain reaction, actually. They see around, prices keep on going, and they sort of follow that trend. That's why perhaps actually people don't realize that everything is very much tied up. The increase of one item would have definitely an increase on other items, but at different degrees. Inflation is really bad and people will be hurt. What happens actually when you have 20% inflation rate, the people who will be much affected are people.
For thousands of years, the peoples of the Horn of Africa have revered the mighty Nile. Its spiritual significance to these lands has been enshrined in poetry, music, and spoken word for time immemorial. And in a land that is holy to Christians and Muslims and followers of many faiths, these waters hold a place in the hearts of millions of Africans. And in all this time, the waters have flowed with only a dream of being able to harness and help bring millions of women, children, and men out from darkness. Today, a new dawn is upon us, when a continent can rejoice in unison. The grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam stands as a beacon of hope for all Africans. The use of a hydroelectric dam which does not consume the water, but rather allows it to continue its flow to our brothers and sisters in Sudan and Egypt, will finally allow the lights to turn on in all of the African Nile Basin countries. Since the dawn of time, Ethiopia, who contributes 80% plus of the waters, has used 0%. Today, more than 60% of Ethiopians do not have access to basic electricity. Ethiopia has watched as her soil and minerals be swept away to irrigate the cotton farms of Egypt, while her mothers still carry firewood upon their backs and sit in darkness. The time for a fair and equitable share of the Nile is now. The time for all 11 African nations who feed the Nile to share in its life-giving potential is now. This is truly a dam of inclusivity, of kindness, and of shared prosperity. Light, energy, education, food security, and a chance for prosperity for millions. This is Africa's dam. This is our dam. This is my dam.
Well, excuse me, I apologize for the technical glitch we encountered previously. In our sports update, the Ethiopian national football team beats Madagascar 4-0 at home to take a significant step toward qualification from Group K. Madagascar came into the match knowing that the victory would see them through, but they were outplayed by the Wallets, who raced to a 3-0 halftime lead. Ethiopia, whose 9 points are now two better than Madagascar's, must avoid defeat in Ivory Coast, who travel to Niger on Friday later this month to seal Nations Cup qualification. The Ethiopian national team last qualified for the finals in 2013. Burkina Faso, Algeria, Mali, Senegal, Tunisia, and the host nation have so far qualified for the delayed 2021 African Cup of Nations in Cameroon. Finally, a quick recap of today's top story. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed calls on Russia and African countries to uplift their collaboration to a new height. That's all the news there is for now. Many thanks for watching us. Bye-bye.